Hey peers, welcome back to the Modern Myths Podcast. I'm Vince Ventura, your host for the Modern Myths Podcast and artistic director of 12 Peers Theater. We're changing things up a bit here at the Modern Myths Podcast, as you may have noticed. Now, new episodes will be premiering Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Also, we're changing up the structure a bit this month. First up, we have the first half of an interview I did with Michael Aman, playwright of Caliban. Next week, we'll be airing Caliban in its entirety. The week following will be the second half of the interview I did with Michael Aman. And lastly, we'll answer your questions from social media, so be sure to submit your questions on Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, at 12 Peers Theater, and facebook.com/12 Peers Theater. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Now, let's dive right into my interview with Michael Aman, playwright of Caliban. Hey, Piers, I'm on the line with Michael Aman, playwright of Caliban. We have a couple of questions from Michael today, and we want to dig right in with the first question. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what got you interested in playwriting?
Sure. I'm from upstate New York. I grew up on a farm, and I was extremely shy, so I found theater to be a good outlet for being told what to say on stage as a performer, and I was very resistant to the writing components, just thinking writing's for other people. But when I became a grammar school teacher, I wanted to do shows with the kids and hopefully, instill in them the love that was instilled in me as a playwright. But I didn't have anything for my middle kids, so I wrote a show and discovered, oh, wow, I enjoy doing this. And that led to more writing and couple of playwriting groups that I was part of in the 90s, and then I ran a couple playwriting groups, and that led to getting a master's in dramaturgy so I could work with new playwrights, and I have not stopped writing since.
It's definitely a shift going from an interpretive artist like an actor or a director and changing over to a creative artist who develops a world for the actors and the directors. Who are some of your favorite playwrights?
Well, I think the most influential play for me was Angels in America. What a profound effect that had on me when I saw the original productions in New York. That's huge. Certainly Shakespeare, Beckett, and Tennessee Williams has had a huge influence on me. And all the ones that you're forced to read as an undergrad, I gobbled them up. Arthur Miller or the Eugene O'Neill is another great one of my favorite playwrights, particularly Tennessee Williams and Eugene O'Neill. O'Neill for his complexity and Tennessee Williams for his poetry.
I like it. I think that's it's very fortunate for you that you enjoyed the ones you were forced to read.
Yes, that was fortunate, wasn't it?
What kind of stories do you like to tell through theater? It's definitely a very specific art form when it comes to the kind of stories that are told on stage. What stories do you like to tell?
Well, I'm drawn to theater for what it can do that film can't do. So what film does so well is naturalism. Theater uses the word, and I look for what can be experimental. What can I do on a stage that will succeed more eloquently than it would in a film? So, like in this play, the use of language was very appealing for me, and I like posing a problem for myself. For instance, I wrote a musical about Bonnie and Clyde, and the challenge there was to create two likable people who were so detestable.
That's very challenging, I think.
Yeah, I enjoy the challenge of sort of painting myself into a corner even before I begin the play.
And the other cool thing about theater, from where I sit, is that it has the ability to incorporate the other senses between just sight and sound a little more effectively than any other art form.
Yeah, it's fully collaborative with the audience, and it affects all the senses. I mean, there was a play, I think it was done at Second Stage in the 90s, where they prepared a meal on the stage, and so it even included the sense of smell. I have a play that's being done in Florida in June of this year that does the same thing, where meals are prepared as part of the play.
Well, let me ask you this. What was your inspiration for writing this play specifically, for writing Caliban?
I mean, certainly drawn to the challenge of writing an iambic pentameter for the one character and then juxtaposing that character with other people. But I think the emotional impetus for the play was to explore the theme of forgiveness and self-forgiveness and the power that resentments have over us. So starting from the launching point of Caliban, and if he were still alive, would he still hold the resentments he had against Prospero? I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that would play out.
That's very interesting. Do you think that the prose versus the poetry or the verse helped you understand the characters better?
I never really understand my characters. I used to write from an outline, which I don't do anymore, which I call writing without a net. It's terrifying because I don't know what's going to happen next. So I don't really know the characters until the end of the first draft. So I actually just today I'm working on another show, and I found the longhand version of Caliban in one of the notebooks I was using today, and a lot of what you see now is the first draft. It's almost like I'm taking dictation from the characters, so that somebody says something and the other one says something. I had no idea that they were going to say that, so I didn't come into it with a sense of who these people were. I just started writing them, and they emerged. And draft number 2 is where I refine that and try to give it a little more structure and definition to the characters.
That's very interesting, and I think it's really interesting to note that you wrote the play longhand as opposed to sitting down with sort of screenwriting or playwriting software.
What I do, but because of the nature of language in this particular play, I did it handwritten. That's how I write lyrics as well, because there's such a it has to have perfect. For me, I have to have perfect scansion in lyrics. That for instance, each A section matches each other. Same thing with this one. I needed the perfect pentameter for each line, and to do that on the screen, maybe it's just out of pure fear that I didn't go that way. But I took pen to paper, which I don't do for a lot of plays.
Is your playwriting process flexible, or is it pretty rigid for most plays that you write?
By process, you mean the daily routine, or by how I attack the play?
Well, that's a great question. You said you wrote Caliban kind of without a net or without an outline?
I did not know where it was going. I had written the same idea years ago, and I don't know, around in the late 90s, and I could not find that play. So all I remembered was the character Caliban being on an island. That's all I had. But I didn't know where the play was going to end. All I knew is at some point in the play, I wanted to have him say a sonnet, which is basically Michael Aman saying, "I know I'm not Shakespeare." So that's Caliban gives a speech. It's like, I don't have the language that once I had. That's me saying, I know I'm not Shakespeare. I'm not pretending to be.
That's very meta. It's a very interesting off-the-hook apology. I like it.
That's just me begging the audience not to judge me.
That's great. Well, let me ask you this. How is a Shakespeare character different in a play not written or adapted from Shakespeare?
How is the Shakespeare character? Like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, there's two characters. They're just purely comic with those little arch moments that really stand out because they're the original play. How is it different? So I'm taking the essence of Caliban. I guess it's purely through my interpretation of his character as an abused, somewhat childlike, purely instinctual creature who didn't really understand what happened to him, and is very hurt by the idea that somebody who he ventured to love betrayed him, and he doesn't want to go there again. So I guess to answer that's the long answer, but the short answer is, for me, it has to come through the author, I guess. How does the author, what is their interpretation of that character or those characters?
That seems so obvious, but I think it's really easy to forget that we're actually viewing him through the lens of someone else's opinion of that character. And that was part 1 of my interview with Michael Aman. Be sure to tune in next week for his play Caliban, which will air in its entirety, followed up by part 2 of my interview with Michael, and then we'll answer your questions from Facebook and Twitter. While you're there, give us a like on Facebook, maybe give us a follow on Twitter, and if you're listening on iTunes, it never hurts to subscribe, rate, and review. The Modern Myths podcast is produced by 12 Piers Theater. Executive producer Vince Ventura. Producers Sarah Fisher, Matt Henderson, and Marcus Savage. Dramaturg Abigail Caddy. Caliban was directed by Matt Henderson. Emma, Laura Lee Brodigan. Caliban, J. Alex Noble. Nicholas, Christopher Josephs. Wendy, Maggie Carr. Stage directions read by Sarah Ashley Fisher. Recording location generously provided by Timesys Corporation. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review.